What's going on, my friends? Welcome to the Cobwebs channel. My name is Daniel, and you guys know I like to watch spooky movies on physical media. So this is my monthly show where I talk about all of the Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs even that I watched over the last month. This time it was January 2024. That's a new year. And I'm going to review them all for you and rank them from my least favorite to my favorite. First time discoveries, movies I saw for the first time, or just checked out on a new Blu-ray or 4K release for the first time. So we're going to kick off with number 13, because we've got 13 movies to talk about. The Return of Count Yorga. This is the Arrow Video Count Yorga collection, actually the UK release, because I've owned this long before the US release came out. A little bit of a humble brag there. I love the first Count Yorga, classic 70s vampire movie starring Robert Quarry as Count Yorga, kind of a Dracula stand-in, but differentiated just enough. I really love him, a great vampire. But I watched the sequel for the first time, and I wasn't actually a very big fan of it. I think it was done a real disservice by the fact that I just rewatched the original Count Yorga right before it, which I really love. And the Return of Count Yorga really feels like a remake of the first movie, right down to having the same actor play the main vampire hunter, just as a different character this time. It's kind of, you know what it's like? It's like Return of the Living Dead Part 2, where it's kind of the same movie over again, but crappier this time. And it's even got the similar, like the same actors playing different characters, but doing the same thing. That's what the Return of Count Yorga is. And it was kind of boring to me. And it also tried to get an actual romance in there with Count Yorga, of him falling in love with a woman. And Robert Quarry as Count Yorga is such a cold monster that I just didn't buy it. At number 12 is Supernatural. This is a Kino Lorber release of a pre-code horror film. This actually came out in 1933, and it's starring Carol Lombard and Randolph Scott. Randolph Scott, classic Western star from the 1950s, and Carol Lombard, she did a lot of like romantic comedies and such, but here they are in a horror movie. The movie kicks off about a woman who is a serial killer who kills her male lovers. She's about to go to the electric chair. I think it's the electric chair. But then there's a psychiatrist who believes that her spirit will not die with her. But so she's executed, but somehow through some crystal ball kind of spookiness, her spirit ends up possessing a innocent young woman played by Carol Lombard. And well, it's only about an hour long, so it's very short. And the movie just has a lot of ideas that I don't think it can quite deal with in just 1 hour. Because, you've got the serial killer stuff, the supernatural stuff. You've got this one psychic who's faking being a psychic to try to get money and such. There's just a lot going on. And when we got to the end of this movie, my reaction was really like, that's it, huh? I even rewound it. I was like, surely I missed something. It can't just be over, but I rewound it, and sure enough, it ended. That was it. At number 11 is the movie that just broke my heart. Obviously not the worst movie that I watched last month, but it is the movie that disappointed me the most. That is The Mummy's Revenge, starring Paul Naschy. I paid a pretty penny for this over a Diabolic DVD because this is a pretty rare Blu-ray and they had one copy left. I love Paul Naschy, Spanish horror filmmaker. This is his Mummy movie. I was so excited to see his take on a mummy because I think there are a lot of mummy movies that are disappointing. There are some I love, but there's a lot of disappointing ones. And Paul Naschy movies, they pretty much never disappoint me. They're always fun, entertaining, and kind of crazy. And this is the least fun and entertaining Paul Naschy movie I have ever seen. It is the only Paul Naschy movie I have seen that I would describe as boring. It kicks off with a very evil pharaoh in ancient Egypt who ends up getting betrayed by the people closest to him because he's such a horrible pharaoh. Mummified, buried, and then we cut to present day, and what do you know, he ends up coming to life. And the mummy, played by Paul Naschy actually plays a dual role in this, both as the mummy and as a descendant of the mummy who's trying to bring him back to life. So Paul Naschy's not hero and villain, he's villain and other villain, essentially. And what works about this movie is Paul Naschy as the mummy. I love this mummy because he has a great look. I love that he's got the wrappings, he's got the decrepit face that you would expect, but he's also got more ancient Egyptian clothing. And I like that he's intelligent. He doesn't just stumble around like a zombie strangling people. This mummy talks, he has plots, he has evil schemes. This is a great mummy. Boy, I wish the movie around him was better. You've got Jack Taylor as the hero. He is so boring. Unbelievable. There was nothing to this guy. All the characters are very dull. There's really not a lot of story. There's a lot of just wandering around. The slipcover is great. This is a really cool Scorpion releasing Blu-ray, but the movie I just couldn't really get into. Now at number 10 and 9, we've got movies that I checked out in this Vinegar Syndrome collection, Mexican Gothic, the films of Carlos Enrique Taboada. I was so excited to get this because I've started getting into Mexican horror films lately. This has got 2 movies from the 70s, one from the 80s, and I checked out 2 of the movies over this past month, so I've still got 1 to go. So at number 10, I'm actually putting The Poison of the Fairies, which ended up being quite a disappointment for me, actually. I was pretty bummed out. Not a bad movie at all, but it's basically about these 2 little girls, little kids, and one of them is rich and very privileged, and one of them is very troubled. They become friends almost by the less privileged girl, almost kind of holding the rich girl hostage a little bit into this friendship that she doesn't really want. But the poor girl feels such a lack of power in her life that she starts claiming she's a witch. She starts claiming witchcraft. Witchcraft as an element for female empowerment is a very typical theme in the genre, and this time it's the empowerment of a child. It does have some good witchy content in there, some. It's got a pretty dark ending that I was not expecting it to fully go there, but the reality of watching this movie is for most of it, you're gonna watch a couple of little girls hang out and play and just hang out. That's the reality of watching it. So it struggled to keep my attention, and I just didn't really enjoy my time with it that much. So I was disappointed by The Poison of the Fairies. At number 9, though, I'm going to put Blacker Than Night, which is a movie that I don't know if it's any better, but it's a movie I enjoyed a little bit more because it is a haunted house movie. It's about this woman and her friends, extremely beautiful, but very uninteresting women who get an inheritance of this big spooky house, and they all move in. The only condition of this is they have to take care of the black cat that lives there. They fail to take care of this cat, and a ghost starts committing revenge. So pretty good ghost stuff in this movie. Some good revenge killings that this ghost attacks these people with. One thing to note about this movie, though, is despite the fact that it came out in the 70s, and it looks very much like a giallo kind of a thing, especially with, you know, the way the women look. They look very much like giallo actresses. This is a very non-trashy movie. There's almost no sexual content of any kind. The violence is very held back. It's really not that bloody or anything. It's a very restrained, chaste movie, which I was a bit surprised about. Both of these movies are well made, but they're both very slow, a little too slow for my taste. Darker Than Night definitely was, but it was a movie I enjoyed a bit more because it's a haunted house movie about more characters rather than, you know, just watching a couple of kids. At number 8, we've got The Bride from 1985. He actually picked up this DVD used for just a few bucks. It's a movie I've been wanting to check out, especially since I'm doing a big Frankenstein deep dive ranking video on the channel very soon. This is a Frankenstein movie from the 80s starring Sting. Yes, Sting from The Police as Dr. Frankenstein, and Jennifer Beals as the Bride of Frankenstein. Basically, the movie kicks off right at the end of The Bride of Frankenstein, like the Universal film, except the bride and the monster live, and the Dr. Frankenstein goes on to basically try to teach the bride to be the perfect woman, and that is his goal. Shout out to Jennifer Beals. She was both a vampire in Vampire's Kiss and a Bride of Frankenstein in this movie in the 80s, so that's very cool. I really liked her in this movie. Who I really loved, though, is Clancy Brown as the monster. He ends up going on his own storyline out into the country, finding his own life, and this movie's very much not a horror movie. It's just this period drama that takes the characters of Frankenstein, and I found Clancy Brown as the monster so lovable. He starts this very sweet friendship with David Rappaport, which I just loved. And this is just like a nice little movie. It's a nice little drama with the Frankenstein characters. At number 7, a brand new Shudder horror movie that just came to Blu-ray, we've got Suitable Flesh. Now, what is interesting about this movie is it was actually going to be a Stuart Gordon movie. Stuart Gordon made some of the greatest Lovecraft adaptations of all time, Reanimator, From Beyond, Dagon. But unfortunately, he did sadly pass away before he had the chance to make this movie. But Barbara Crampton got it going again, because Barbara Crampton worked with Stuart Gordon a lot, and she produced this movie. She brought on a director. It's directed by Joe Lynch, who is a director that I kind of like. He's made some pretty good movies like Mayhem. This is a new Stuart Gordon-like H.P. Lovecraft adaptation, which is really, really cool. And I found it interesting. This movie has turned out to be super polarizing, which I wasn't really expecting, but I actually quite liked it. I didn't think it's great. It doesn't hold a candle to those Stuart Gordon movies. Doesn't go near as hardcore on any of the horrific elements or anything like that. It's a much more restrained movie. I just wanted it to go crazier than it did. Also, it doesn't look great from a visual level. It looks like a TV movie, maybe a Lifetime movie. I've heard some people say they think that's on purpose. They wanted it to have a direct-to-DVD 90s erotic thriller kind of look. If it was on purpose, I think it was a mistake. I wish it looked more like a real movie. But it's interesting, a body-swapping horror movie with some gross elements, some really cool gore effects, and a pretty great cast. Always happy to see Barbara Crampton in anything. For number 6, I did check out another movie in the Paul Naschy Collection Volume 2, and this was The Werewolf and the Yeti. I actually gave this a dedicated review on the channel, the first video in a new series I'm trying to do of vintage horror reviews, and I was very pleasantly surprised how well that video was received, so thank you all so much for watching it. If you haven't, check it out on the channel. And I did enjoy this movie, a snowy horror film, part of Paul Naschy's big werewolf franchise that he made, all about werewolf Waldemar Daninsky, in which he fights a Yeti, which is pretty darn cool. There's not a lot of Yeti in this movie, but he does fight a crime syndicate a lot, which is pretty fun. Paul Naschy described this movie as his live-action comic book come to life, and it does kind of feel like that, but with a werewolf as the superhero, which totally fits for Paul Naschy because I'm currently reading his autobiography, and he said that when he was a kid, Larry Talbot as the Wolfman was his hero. So for him, the Wolfman is like Spider-Man. So this is his comic book superhero movie about the Wolfman, and it's pretty darn fun. Okay, everyone, this is what I've been waiting for, the top 5. These are some heavy hitters. I'm so excited to tell you about these movies. So first up, we have got Night of the Demons 2. This is the new Scream Factory Blu-ray. It actually came out back in October, but I picked it up over the past month. I also got, let me grab this. I also got Night of the Demons 3 as well, but I haven't watched this one yet. I'm looking forward to it, so this will show up in a future watch list video. This is a sequel to the 1980s horror film Night of the Demons, about a bunch of kids on Halloween night who go to party in a spooky house and demons start possessing them. I really like that movie. It's not particularly well made, but it's very fun, has a great energy to it. But I gotta say, Night of the Demons 2, I think it's even better. Why? This is a better script and better actors, no question about it. I was way more into this movie before any of the horror stuff started than I was expecting to. It's about a bunch of teenagers at a very strict Catholic school for troubled youth. So they're a bunch of bad kids, some of them much, much worse than others for sure. But I found them all very fun and entertaining. The actors are really engaging. I watched an interview on the Blu-ray with the main actress, Christy Harris, and she talks a lot about just how much fun they all had making this movie. They just had a blast. It was just like a constant party making this thing. And that comes across. You can tell these actors are just having a blast. But then once the horror stuff starts, it's awesome. Like insane effects, insane horror gags. Like the first movie is kind of famous for this crazy practical effects gag involving lipstick and Linnea Quigley's boob. This movie tries to top the boob gag, and boy does it ever. It's the greatest boob practical effects horror gag of all time. I don't know how many movies are in the running, but from what I've seen, this is the best. If you like the first Night of the Demons, you've got to pick up 2 from Scream Factory. What a great release. At number 4 is a movie that I wasn't even sure I wanted to buy. I actually put it out to you guys in the community tab of this channel, asking for your advice. Should I even get this? And you guys said yes. You were right. Frankenstein, The True Story. This is also a Scream Factory release. This is a 1970s TV, technically miniseries, a 2-part miniseries, but just watch as a movie. It takes about 3 hours. I put this on one night, not intending to finish it in one night because there wasn't enough time before I like going to bed, but I watched it all in one sitting because I just couldn't turn it off. I stayed up late. I loved this so much. This is hands down one of the best horror TV movies in general that I have ever seen. Like it might even top Salem's Lot for me, which is crazy. A stunning period piece telling of Frankenstein. This movie looks incredible, huge, amazing Gothic sets and costumes everywhere you look. I couldn't believe how expensive this looked. And it takes a lot of really interesting twists with the Frankenstein story. Not a terribly faithful adaptation, but that's totally fine with me. Very few Frankenstein movies are. One difference I do want to talk about is when the monster is revived. The monster does look beautiful. He is the perfect human specimen that Frankenstein tried to make. And I was disappointed by that at first. I was like, oh, I kind of want a monster, you know? Like, give me something spooky. But they find that the method they use to regenerate his dead flesh and make him look beautiful starts regressing. And as the movie goes, he gets uglier and uglier, and he gets more and more bitter towards how Frankenstein treats him. And at a certain point in this movie, you just know anytime he shows up, he is going to wreck shop. Like, I got so excited at a certain point anytime he showed up on screen because you know stuff was going to go down with this monster. He is pretty ruthless, but still sympathetic because you understand why he feels that way. an incredible version of Frankenstein, and I can't wait to talk about it in my Frankenstein deep dive video coming on the channel very soon. At number 3, this is a movie that also blew my expectations out of the water. I could not believe how much I loved Blue Steel. This is Vestron's new release of the Catherine Bigelow 1990 action thriller horror movie. Yes, I am going to put this into the horror category, starring Jamie Lee Curtis. I love the Vestron line. I collect them, and was really happy to pick this up because I always meant to watch it, but I didn't expect it to be this good. It's a ridiculous movie. It's extremely pulpy. It's about Jamie Lee Curtis, a woman who's always wanted to be a cop. She graduates from the police academy. Her first night on the job, she catches a robber who's robbing a grocery store, and she unloads her clip into this guy. She just blows him away. But there is a mild-mannered stockbroker at the scene who, in a strange, surprising act, decides to steal the gun that the robber was using. Now that it looks like the robber is unarmed, Jamie Lee Curtis gets in a lot of trouble, but she does end up being part of the investigation that is led up by Clancy Brown. Yes, Clancy Brown is back on the list, into a string of horrific murders that are happening that all seem to be tied to Jamie Lee Curtis. It is a wildly fun and entertaining movie. Takes everything very seriously, which is kind of my favorite kind of ridiculous movie, because Ron Silver, he is the guy who's romancing Jamie Lee Curtis. He's the guy who steals the gun, and it seems like he's the guy who's doing the murders. He's basically in American Psycho, or he is in Vampire's Kiss, a office guy who just lets loose and goes completely unhinged. His performance is crazy. Jamie Lee Curtis's performance is awesome. I loved Blue Steel. If you enjoy thrillers, action movies, kind of serial killer horror movies from this time period, you've got to get this new Vestron Blu-ray. It's awesome. At number 2, the only movie on the list that 100% does not fit into the horror genre, this is the new Shout Factory 4K for The Man in the Iron Mask, a version of the Three Musketeers story where the Musketeers are much older and there is an evil king played by Leonardo DiCaprio who they decide they cannot stand anymore and they've got to get rid of him. Got an amazing cast with like Jeremy Irons, John Malkovich, Gabriel Byrne, and Leonardo DiCaprio in a dual role because they find out there's a man in an iron mask in a horrific prison who might be the key to replacing this evil king. This is a movie that was not received well by critics when it came out, and it seems like a lot of people still don't like it, but this was a childhood favorite for me. I love this movie. I rewatched it. I still love this movie. I think it was even better than I remembered. Maybe if people are just wanting a swashbuckling action movie, they might be disappointed. Those elements are there, but it's definitely much more of a political thriller about getting rid of this king. This new Shout Factory 4K looks absolutely gorgeous, so I'm so happy to have this in my collection. But at number 1, one of the best Vinegar Syndrome blind buys I have ever done. This is Burning Paradise from 1994. This is a Hong Kong period piece, action, martial arts, gothic horror film. Yes, I said all those things in the same sentence, from director Ricky Lau. Now, I am not well versed in Hong Kong movies at all, but I've decided this is the year where I'm going to get into them. And this was the first one that I watched this year, and I fell in love with this movie so hard. Because for one thing, the martial arts elements, fantastic. Like there's an opening action scene where a guy is literally fighting off an army with a giant sword that is his weapon of choice throughout the movie. That this sword is like decapitating people. It's slicing people in half. This incredible battle scene of one man against the world. He ends up being our hero through the whole movie, but he does get imprisoned by the oppressive government. And this prison is like Dracula's castle. And the warden is like Dracula, even though he's not a vampire, but just everything about it, it is so gothic, and the villain is just such a classic like vampire archetype. I just loved it so much. The atmosphere of this movie and the spooky elements that do come into play are so fantastic, just amazing. And there's also a very sweet romance in this movie because this prison doesn't just have men in it. And I found as I'm watching Hong Kong movies that I actually really like the rom-com sex comedy elements that they usually have. I hear that's the main complaint with Hong Kong movies. They can be action movies or very serious genres, but they've got like these sex comedy parts. So far, I'm digging that, and I loved it in Burning Paradise. This is an amazing movie. Atmosphere, action, characters, everything about it's amazing. And I'm loving Hong Kong movies. I've got more coming in my Vinegar Syndrome haul that's coming on the way to me very soon, and I'm so excited to watch them. But what did you watch over the last month? Let me know down in the comments below, and check out this playlist right over here of all of my monthly watch list videos. I've been doing this for well over a year now, so there's a ton of them. Give this video a like if you enjoyed this, and definitely subscribe if you haven't, because I've got a lot of cool spooky movie talk coming over the next month. Thank you so much for watching. With all that said, don't forget to take some time to enjoy yourself today, and I will see you next time.